So let's get more now on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals in Africa. We're joined by Professor Nnadozie, the Executive Secretary of the African Capacity Building Foundation based in Harare, Zimbabwe. Thank you for joining us on Africa 54.
Thank you.
The Sustainable Development Goals, known popularly as SDGs, are designed to produce positive outcomes in critical areas that can guarantee good quality of life. How would you assess the efforts of African governments so far to align the 17 goals to their national development plans?
Yes, I think my assessment will be a mixed one. The reason being that there are some countries that have successfully streamlined and integrated the Sustainable Development Goals within their national development plans and national development agenda. And there are some countries that have not made significant progress in this effort.
When we talk of sustainable development in African nations, one snag seems to be the issue of inclusive growth and, of course, of development as well. Is enough being done to empower youths and women in Africa?
Yes, of course. One of the good things about the Sustainable Development Goals is that it does explicitly look at some of these issues that will lead to inclusive growth and socioeconomic development. In particular, the issues that relate to employment and the issues that relate to women and gender equality. So these are things that are explicitly put in there. This is why the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, present a unique opportunity for African governments to really tailor their development efforts within or in line with the SDGs in order to really, by 2030, to achieve those 17 goals that have been outlined in the Sustainable Development Goals.
So capacity building, if I must say, is one of the areas that your organization focuses on. Could you highlight some key areas that could make achieving the SDGs a reality?
You see, the assessment we did some years ago about the Millennium Development Goals, the predecessor to the Sustainable Development Goals, we all remember the MDGs, we found out that it was not necessarily the lack of financial resources that made it difficult for African countries to achieve satisfactory results as far as those goals are concerned, the MDGs. But the critical thing was capacity deficits and capacity challenges that come in form of lack of critical technical skills, institutional weaknesses, lack of leadership, and debilitating mindsets in the continent. Therefore, if these things are not addressed in the Sustainable Development Goals, I'm afraid that the same outcome that we had with the MDGs, which is less than satisfactory, is what might happen to the SDGs. So capacity development is the missing link, is the critical ingredient. And I've listed exactly what they are, because you can understand that no matter how much resources you have, no matter how much goodwill you have, if you have a debilitating mindset, and I will give some examples eventually, if you don't have good leadership, if you don't have the critical technical skills that are needed for economic transformation, and if you do not have, finally, the institutional mechanisms that are functional enough, that are strong enough, I'm afraid achieving the SDGs goals will be difficult.
Right. So what other recommendations, aside from those who just outlined, would you give stakeholders, particularly the governments?
Well, yes, I think the critical thing is the government must be in the driver's seat, and Africans must be in the driver's seat. And they must also champion the mobilization of everybody, all the stakeholders, because the SDGs is not for government, it's for everybody. So the private sector, the civil society, the women and youth, and other organizations, non-state actors, ought to be fully mobilized and involved in the whole process. That's one. Number two is that the institutional mechanism for driving the SDGs must be put in place. I'm not talking about a little office there with some signboard. I'm talking about something that is well positioned within the structure of government so that it will get the deserved attention it requires. Number three, then, is to align the SDGs with existing development strategies so that there will be some coherence in pursuing the development agenda of any country. And number four is then to focus on this issue that I mentioned of capacity development, which will be started, the starting point being to conduct what we call the capacity needs assessment or diagnostic assessment of the capacity needed for achieving them for each country. We have done this overall now with examples of some countries, and some countries, including Nigeria, for instance, has and learned from the work that we have done in trying to address these things. So, of course, resources will be needed, financial resources, I mean. There's need for higher levels of domestic resource mobilization that is needed to do this so that Africans will be in the driver's seat, not excessively depend on foreign aid.
Right. Thank you so much for your thoughts on that, Professor Nnadozie, the Executive Secretary of the African Capacity Building Foundation. Thank you for joining us today on Africa 54.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.